testing 1, 2. Audio test 1, 2.
Test, 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 test. Okay.
Test 1, 2. Test 1, 2. Testing 1, 2.
Test 1, 2, test 1, 2. Test, test. Test, test. Test, test. That seemed to fix it.
Yeah, it's just feeding its own frequency.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure it out.
All right.
Test 1, 2. Test.
Test, test. Zach, I think that fixed it. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. It is October 5th at 6:30 p.m. I'm going to start by reading our mission statement aloud tonight. The mission of Monument Academy is to provide a challenging, content-rich academic program offered within an engaging, caring, and positive learning environment. Established on a solid foundation of knowledge, Monument Academy emphasizes academic excellence, respect, responsibility, character, and exemplary citizenship. Would everyone please rise for our Pledge of Allegiance?
One nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you, everyone. That will lead us into our roll call this evening. Mrs. Belisle.
Here.
Mr. Bushkowski.
Here.
Mr. Carley.
Here.
Mrs. Clinton.
Here.
Mrs. Hoyda.
Here.
Mr. Ross.
Here.
Ryan Graham is here. We do have a quorum. We will proceed forward with our agenda. This evening, Board, do we have any additions or corrections that need to be made to the agenda for tonight's meeting? All right, hearing none, the agenda is approved as distributed by unanimous consent. That will lead us into citizen comments pertaining to agenda items, and we do not have any this evening. Next item on the agenda will be our school spotlight. I will go ahead and yield to Mr. Carley for this portion.
All right. So every month we like to nominate one of our outstanding members of our community for going above and beyond for Monument Academy. And this month, we have a nomination from one of our staff members, and I'd like to read the nomination aloud. So I'd be happy to nominate Carl Brown. Carl has stepped up this school year as a leader, not only for his grade level team, but as a leader in the school. Carl has taken extraordinary steps to support his colleagues through providing them to help teachers with setting up their canvas for the upcoming school year, mentoring new teachers, and as the team lead, he keeps them informed and supported. Carl always provides excellent instruction in his classroom. He sets up high expectations for his students' learning, and they meet those expectations. Even though it is challenging, the students come away understanding how much they have learned in the classroom. Carl does not rest on his laurels and always is looking to improve his practice by asking questions and implementing new learnings. Carl does not let a minute of the day go to waste, and Carl makes such a positive impact on our students in the MA community. Congratulations, Mr. Carl Brown.
Thank you, gentlemen. That will lead us to our consent agenda. Board, the minutes from September 14th and September 20th have been distributed to you electronically. Are there any corrections or requests for the minutes to be read aloud? All right, hearing none, the minutes are approved as distributed by unanimous consent. Board, the budget work session for October 26th is at 6:30 p.m. Are there any objections to this date and time? Hearing none, the budget work session is set, and that will lead us into our reports of administration and committees, and we will start with our executive director report tonight.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to be back. Thank you so much for reading my update from my absence. I got to spend some amazing time in multiple countries, and it was just it was absolutely beautiful, and but glad to be back and in the swing of things again, and getting back to some regular schedules, I guess. I think I felt it did feel a little long. I was looking forward to getting back, and that's kind of ironic with vacations, but it is good to be back in the, I think this one's on. Oh, there we go. That's fine. No, you're fine. So I just have a few updates because it was somewhat of a short month for me in terms of what I was doing since I was out for a couple weeks. But I did want to point out that our team updates, since the meeting was moved up a week, my team, usually they give them to me by that Friday, so I will have them to you on Monday because they were a little caught off at guard. So I did get some of them, but I wanted to make sure it was comprehensive, so I'll make sure that you all get forwarded all of the rest of the team updates this coming next week. One of my first updates that has to do with the strategic planning work that we've been doing. Before I left, Jake, Krista, and I, and the principals, they were able to even meet with some of the leadership team to go over the beginning part of our RACI model to split up the workload. As you know, there's multiple goals and objectives that need to be accomplished, and that takes some strategy in terms of different, not so much committees, but like task forces that will have certain people who are accountable, responsible, who will be contributors, who are going to be the main informed people, and that will help guide sort of the direction of the strategies that are going to be taken, and those people who are accountable will actually be able to pick who is on their their task force for that particular objective. So that has been decided on who will be accountable first, so that then those people can start to create their teams. That then will have some work, and that first part of their work is to identify in each of those objective areas what strategies they're going to begin with, so that then we can present that and start to report on that in our dashboard. So that is well on its way. We did have a D38, I think it was 5 members, so it was Casey Summers, the superintendent, Amber, the assistant superintendent, Brett Ridgway, the CFO, Rick Frampton, is he director or executive director? Executive director of special education, and then Alicia, and I can't remember Alicia's last name, but she's the director of HR. They all came to the West Campus and did a site visit. They hadn't done a site visit. Casey said, gosh, I hadn't been over to the school since I think the first year he was a superintendent. And Mr. Walker did a phenomenal job of giving them a tour, and we met for about an hour first, had some lunch together, and just really, I will tell you, the overall tone of just the meeting, it was a couple hours, was very positive. They are very appreciative of our partnership and the leadership that that the board has had, and the leadership that I'm providing as executive director, and that Glenn's doing with his work, and then just the teams and the administration that we have. Even Anna got a little accolade from Mr. Braum, and just saying how great, what an addition she is. And Alicia was talking about HR and how Krista's just very on top of the reporting that we need to do. And so that just felt really good. They said in all the years that it's been kind of the most quiet year, but that's a good thing. But they really are looking forward to creating that continued partnership, because Casey even said, I know Monument's here, it's been here since '96, and he said, it's not going anywhere. We appreciate the partnership, we love you guys, we think you're doing a great job, and he wants to continue to promote what we're doing at Monument Academy in a very positive way. I think the district has some really good leadership in place as well, so I said it's reciprocated. The work that they now have in place and the leadership that they have, I said, it's been wonderful to work with, and at least on my level and from working with different board members. I'm excited about the next piece that we'll be giving them an annual report. So I'll be doing an annual report on October 23rd. Looking forward to that. They said there's really no template that I have to do it from. So I likely will do the annual report like I usually do all my annual reports with other districts too. So there is, it comes everywhere from, I'll highlight things in our organization from governance, what are, the new board members, maybe some highlights from our June retreat, which will also include some of our strategic plan. I'll also be highlighting financials, so we'll highlight just a real high level of our financials and how we're doing there. Dashboard, so I'll give them some updates on this is what our dashboard will look like. They were actually very impressed. I showed them our Q4 dashboard, and they were like, gosh, this looks amazing, because they're going to start doing a dashboard as well. And so they were really interested to see how ours kind of looked compared to theirs comparatively. We also will give them that will include some of the academics, school demographics, because a lot of times school demographics change, like what is our minority percentage, what is our free and reduced, maybe what our IEP population is, because districts are very interested in what that looks like comparatively to their district schools. And then maybe even what staff development. We'd like to highlight the different staff development that we're doing as a school and what staff are going through with some of the initiatives to meet our goals, and even with our new UIP that you guys will have presented to you from the West Campus on the 9th. That will help explain some of the strategies that we're using to improve academics and academic achievement and growth. Some other highlights that they will be getting are just any yearly changes, the overall big picture of any yearly changes that are occurring. I will highlight that there is we will be working on a succession plan for myself and for the CFO. And what does that look like? What does the leadership look like? Because that was one of their big questions, was how is this going to look? Like, what is the plan? And so, not that we'll have that full plan by then, but I assured them that we are working on a good plan for that moving forward. And then, any other things that you guys would like me to highlight, I'll make sure that it's in sort of an outline prior to me going, and then you guys can just have a quick eye on that for any feedback. But I have to do all of that in about 10, 15 minutes, and then give them an opportunity to, they'll have an opportunity to ask questions from us based on everything that I've presented. So that is a best practice for an authorizer to do this annual report. You don't have to be there. You can watch me later. If you want to be in the audience, that's perfectly fine. Anybody here in the audience, if you'd like to join, it is really nice to be able to kind of have some backup, but it's just a quick, easy annual report. They were like, we're really looking forward to seeing you present that. So, but there is a reception that I'm excited about prior to that. The reception is from 5 to 5:45 for our executive leadership team and for our board. So it's just a networking time and a time for you guys to get to know their board. I will tell you, Casey profusely apologized because he will not be at this meeting, because he said, I'm going to be a dad. I'm setting a boundary and being a dad. And I said, that's good. He's going to be at, I think, his son's game. There's a game that his son's going to be at. So I said, that's fantastic. So he just profusely apologized ahead of time that he won't be there. But he said he's always open to any discussions that you guys might have if you didn't get to have that with him at that time. Some things to look forward to in the upcoming months for the remainder of this semester is Tech Committee is going to be meeting again, the strategic planning teams, the Q1 dashboard. I saw Jennifer Strawbridge yesterday, and she will be working on our Q1 dashboard. She just needs some more information from me on what are the other components that we need to put into the dashboard to present to you all so that it's consistent, and I got to get her the data for that. So I'm hoping to have that in our November board meeting. And then I'm excited about, I had a really good conversation with a Monument Academy parent regarding donors and having face-to-face meetings with some different donors. And so it prompted me to some of the work that I've already talked to you guys about in terms of me meeting one-on-one with people who are interested in donating to Monument Academy, building that relationship. So Jake and I actually had a good lengthy conversation about what that's going to look like. What is that capital campaign effort? How are we going to, now that we have the strategic plan done, how do we build that into a nice put together presentation for anybody that I do meet with? Glenn is completely open to being in those meetings with me. So we actually are scheduling during fall break, because I'm going to be here during fall break and working. So we'll schedule something within the next couple weeks, depending on this person's schedule, to sit down and come up with a plan of action, because they have a list of names that we could maybe even start with. So that's going to take some time, lots of different meetings and so forth. So. But it is very worth it. It's not just a one and done either. It's about building continual relationships and continuing to have those conversations with people. And that also leads me into a really exciting opportunity that Mr. Dykus said that he's actually met with somebody about the BEST grant. And that could be upwards of, it's a lot, isn't it? It's like it could even pay for an entire school. There are some people, I was on a call today at a league cohort, and there was a school in Grand Junction, and they actually just recently got, I think it was like $29 million or something like that through the BEST grant. I know Emily's like, what? Through the BEST grant in order to build their building. I know Steamboat Springs, one of my cousins used to work at a charter school in Steamboat Springs. Their entire building was built with BEST funds as well. So there is money there. It just takes, it is a competitive process. But Jake is already on top of it and has had an initial meeting. Isn't that right? Yep. He had the initial meeting today. And so we'll give you follow-up on that as he's starting to build some of that information. Krista did point out to us in another meeting about some federal funds for capital and building items for charter schools, and so we are looking into that as well. I believe that just actually came across my desk 2 days ago also from the state. But I'm being careful about what I call it like the camel's nose under the tent. What are some of the requirements that if you do accept money like this, what are the strings that could be attached with that? And so I'm wanting to make sure that we don't get ourselves into something that wouldn't follow our mission and our vision and who we are as an organization. So we're being very mindful of that as well. And then I said that I didn't have a lot since I wasn't here for 2 weeks, but it is a lot. Man, this is making me tired. Then CKH Process Champions is going to be on October 24th and 25th. So members from both campuses will have their Process Champion training, where that is all the members who are kind of your champions for how to implement Capturing Kids' Hearts. They'll have representation, and they'll have like an extended training to help kind of mentor other teachers and so that it's not always just on the burden of the administration. That teams, and it gives people the opportunity to lead in other ways and be able to, because sometimes things come better from peers as well. So they will have some intentionality behind their meetings as well, and behind their strategies and plans that they're going to use for our implementation of Capturing Kids' Hearts. And social contract finishing touches are in play right now, and we'll be presenting that to the staff in some future staff meetings, and the upcoming staff meetings, so that they can sign the big 1 MA social contract, because right now it's on a flip chart paper. But we need to get it on something big because we got a big staff so that they can all sign it. Whew. And that, my friends, is it, if you have any questions for me.
Thank you, Mrs. McClellan. Board, any questions?
Just a question about the BEST grant. Did we make this application cycle? I was just looking it up, or would it be for the previous year?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you. Chief Financial Officer report, Mr. Gustafson is running behind, so we're going to skip over that and get into our committee reports. I'll start with the Highway 105 So Board, as you've probably seen, the recirculation road behind MA West is completed, functional and operational. There's 2 small remaining items. There's a swing arm at the top of the S-curve that's getting finalized, and then a pedestrian sign that's getting addressed at the top up there for the crosswalk. Beyond that, behind the school is done. I'd like to say thank you to El Paso County, Wildcat Construction, Wilson and Company, and then, of course, the MA West admin team for all your work on this. The combined efforts have obviously brought us to this place, and it's good to be here. I've been part of this for 3 years now. So the next phase of construction for MA West will include the removal of the current retaining wall on the south side of the campus that's adjacent to Highway 105. Then that wall will be rebuilt, and that's where we had sold a piece of that parcel that runs the length of our property along Highway 105. And then in time, and I'll just set up the expectations that this should be done by next summer, there will be another road carved in, basically following the path of this current sidewalk on the south side of the school up to the S-curve. And that will be the front loop that will be completed by next summer at the latest. If there is the possibility for the county to move that up in this cycle, they will, but I don't want to make any commitments to that. So that is all I have on 105. Any questions on there? That will move us into our curriculum report. Mrs. Belisle.
Thank you. The Curriculum Committee met for the first time this academic school year today. The main topic of discussion was the adoption of new math curriculum. If you were tuned in to my reports from last year, that was the hot topic of discussion throughout the year, and they really narrowed it down. There was a math subcommittee who did a lot of great hard work narrowing down about 8 different curriculums down to their top 3. And we had a lot of good discussion about those top 3 today in the meeting. And the next step is for those top 3 choices to be sent back out to the West campus teachers so they can do a deep dive, really take a look at that curriculum and give some good feedback. And then we will be reviewing that feedback and what they think at our next curriculum committee meeting in November, and hopefully vote on the submission to the parent community and to the board. So that's the timeline. It's really been narrowed down and it's streamlined. And after that, as you may know, according to our newly passed curriculum policy, we will then have the open review period for our parent community. And that should happen hopefully sometime in late November, maybe early December, so that we could possibly vote on the new math curriculum as a board in December. So that is the tentative timeline laid out for now. And this would be conducive to being able to possibly implement the new math curriculum for the West Campus next academic year. The other topic of discussion was very preliminary for our MA writing curriculum so that the committee can start to review and discuss that for better vertical alignment amongst all the grades at MA. And that's all.
Thank you, Mrs. Belisle. Board, any questions? All right, that'll lead us to SAC West. Mr. Ross.
All right, we met this afternoon, matter of fact, for our October meeting. Majority of that meeting was a presentation by Ms. Arndt and Mr. Walker about our Unified Improvement Plan, which was very thorough and very clearly communicated. I would say we maybe just had a couple questions of clarification, but nothing really to add or subtract. So I believe they're going to be prepared Monday to present that, if they're not right now, but Monday night is when it's coming. And yeah, it was great. Other than that, Christy Davis presented on PTO, right? Yeah. And she's really busy. She's really, really busy in October, particularly. So ask her what that means. Other than that, it was a good meeting.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Ross. Mrs. Clinton, SAC East.
No report.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Clinton. That'll move us to governance. Mrs. Hoyda and Mr. Buchkowski.
Great, thank you, Ryan. So the major project that governance has been working on lately has been a policy for our gender transition and parental rights policy based on the board resolution that was passed during the summer. And we are very close to having a draft to present to the board. We were really hoping to have that here at today's meeting, but there were a few comments that will require just a little bit of extra research on our part and to incorporate those. But I don't see anything getting in the way of having a policy to present at the November meeting.
All right, terrific. Thank you for that update, sir. Finance Committee, back to you, Mr. Buchkowski or Mr. Carley.
Ryan, would you like us to come back to finance after Glenn speaks?
That's fine by me. We actually have under discussion action tonight, September 30th, 2023 financial statements. And that is for Mr. Gustafson to present to the board. So we could just wrap all this up into that agenda item if you guys would like. All right. That'll move us to buildings and facilities. Mrs. Hoyda, I don't know if you have any update. I can give a brief. The East admin team, I'd like to thank them for getting the modulars up and running with a certificate of occupancy. My understanding is that this week, students and teachers are now utilizing those classrooms. So that has been a long project in the making as well. So thank you guys for making that happen. Ms. Hoyda, anything to add?
No.
Next will be RDC. This will go to you, Mrs. Clinton, and Mr. Carley.
So RDC had their first meeting last week, so just kind of getting planned on for some of the fundraising that we'll be doing this year and how to best, allocate time and resources to that. Other than that, there's no additional reports, and looking forward to next month's meeting.
All right, terrific. Thank you. HR Subcommittee, no report at this time. That will complete our committee reports for the board, move us into our items requiring board discussion and action. Board, as you're aware, the last two meetings we've had discussion around the employee handbook. Tonight, Mrs. McClellan and Mrs. Pelly will be presenting further information on that handbook for our review. So at this time, I'll go ahead and turn this over to you.
Right. I get to stand, oh, whoa, don't do that, Kim. So I get to stand up instead of sit down for this part of it. So I'm just going to kind of give a little bit more introduction and background to what kind of has occurred with the employee handbook. One of the things is that the employee handbook should go through periodic review and updates. It is something that is more of like a living document because we do know that every legislative session and periodic times throughout the year, there are some legal changes that can occur with legislation. And COVID definitely brought some of that. And so between FMLA, FMLAI, and there's been still, I was on a call today with, I think it was 10 other charter schools throughout the state. And when I brought up that we're looking at revising, and we've been revising our employee handbook and looking at some of our leave policy and sick policy, they were like, oh my gosh, yeah, that we've had lots and lots of questions from staff because it is very, there's so many, there's just a lot to it, and there's a lot of misconceptions that I think tend to occur when people start talking about what is sick leave and what is personal time, and it is very different per organization because you can have specific policies and guidelines that follow what our needs are, but it still has to fall under an umbrella that is a law and for HR law. So there's just some pieces to that I thought, wow, we're not the only ones, and they even had some confusion. I think unions also bring in some confusion when they start to talk, because teachers will. This was part of the discussion today. Was how unions will make negotiations, and they have bargaining agreements and whatnot that can affect what's even happening in that same district's charter, because sometimes teachers don't even realize that they're teaching in a charter and they're not teaching in a district school. And I know, it's kind of like, well, that's kind of surprising, but believe it or not, that happens when you're in a big school district and you have lots of different schools, and especially some of our younger, just out of college students don't necessarily always know the difference between charter versus a district school. So when they're hearing from their friends and whatnot, there can be confusion in terms of, well, that's not what I heard at the board meeting, and we're like, well, there's a different board, and we have different policies, and we have different rules and employee handbooks and so forth. So there can be confusion with that, and that was interesting just hearing that in our in the cohort that I was in today. Another piece is that the team, that would be Glenn and Krista and Maureen and I, we did meet this last week to really ensure, based on the presentation that was given to you at the last board meeting and some of the emails, and we've heard from lots of different staff. Krista spoke with some staff at West Campus, and there was definitely some misconceptions and some confusion that we felt, gosh, you know, we could do a better job at being more clear and looking at the differences to make sure that people really do understand. Because again, going back to that meeting that I had at the cohort, there can be lots of confusion, and we want to make sure that we are as clear as, and we give staff the opportunity to have a voice as much as possible, and that they have that, because when you're dealing with people's pay and their time off, this is a big deal, and so we recognize that that is a really big deal. We also recognize that the timing of this approval is not ideal, fully admit it. However, there were some, one of the things that I want to make sure you guys know is that the state did adopt new labor laws that went into effect in June of 2023. So some of these labor laws didn't even come into effect until after we'd already made offers to staff. So really what happens then is you keep your current handbook and you continue to look at updates, and we did that over the summer, and a lot of times the summer isn't the best time to do that because people are on vacation. Not that any of this is an excuse on the timing, but we do recognize, and so I said, you know, we gotta come up with a better plan to make sure that any of our updates that are significant updates like what has been made, whether positive or pulling something out that could affect people in an, even in a neutral way, we need to be mindful of the timing of that. And so one of the areas of that is that I said, you know what, let's make sure that we do our best to commit, and this comes with you as a board too, and we'll put it in our board calendar on the things that we need to be reviewing every year at certain times of the year, that part of our SOP and a part of our RACI model that we're doing, and the operations and the updates, that we can have, hey, this is a checkbox that in March we start talking about it. What are some changes that are happening? And then in May, when the session closes, is there anything that we need to be looking at, and try to get that done before we give people contracts? Because a lot of times what's the best practice is to have a contract, have your time and days off with the employee handbook. If there's any questions before you go on vacation, we're good and we can move forward. So really looking at trying to have something in May of each year prior to the next school year starting would be fantastic. Now, in a perfect world, that is the goal. So if we can start working towards that goal, then we can get closer and closer each time. So I just wanted to commit that to you all with each other. And then personal leave, I did want to just highlight that what Krista has, and she will present here in a moment as well, is this is part of a confusion that I said, I was like, what is it specifically that's causing this? And I was trying to really think of that common denominator. And one of the areas is that personal leave is compensation in the form of time, not dollars. And this is something that she'll be able to elaborate a little bit more on, but I think, you know, we tend to think, well, my compensation is always going to be money, and time is money, but When we talk about any personal leave compensation, we are talking about that in the form of time and it's not always going to be dollars. And so as we're discussing that and being able to give some clarity around that, I want you all to keep that in mind. And we'll clarify that if we do need to give some clarity on that. And in some cases, we made an exception that we said, hey, as a recommendation in looking at our budget and looking at future and grandfathered people and how long have people been here and what have they been told in the past, because we can't control some of what HR did in the past and what we're doing now. So how do we baseline this so that we can do what's best for our employees? Because that is the goal too, is let's do what's best for our employees and the overall budget so that we can always do what's best for kids at the end of the day. And so we did in some cases say that there will be some compensation in money because that's the best thing to do. But in the big overall picture, personal leave and compensation is in the form of time. The board can take time. I do want to point this out, that I think that this was, Krista was, and I'm going to speak a little bit on her behalf with this, but she did tell me in July, hey, I got to get this, we've got to put this in front of the board. Because we've got new staff coming in and they're asking questions and this is for their sake. And I said, you know what, we've got to make sure we sit down with Glenn and we got to make sure that we have the G policies. I talked to the board about the G policies because those usually kind of coincide with what you have in your employee handbook. And so there were some pieces that I said, we got to pause a little bit so we can find out what's happening during this time between July and August with some of our policy switchovers and whatnot. So I do want to say that her intentionality of trying to get this to you guys and get this going was because of the noise that she was also getting from staff on, what does our handbook say? What does this say? What does this say? And so I think that some of that uneasiness came from a little bit of that too, of the pressure that she's getting from staff. But I want to assure you that she and I both have always known that you guys need time to be able to digest this, because this is a big deal. And so we recognize that. And so we want you to know you're not approving anything tonight. We want to give you time to still be able to ask questions if there's something that you're like, gosh, as I was reading through this even more, I need to discuss this some more. So this is still very much pending what you guys feel and when you go back and you're sort of looking at this yourself. And we can approve it then in November, because technically what we have in a current employee handbook is still in play. And it doesn't mean we're in this like, we don't, something's not there or in place. So I do want to assure you of that you do not need to approve anything tonight. And then last, this effort just really is a part of our strategic planning. We talked about it in our strategic planning group of how do we, under talent initiatives, how do we hire and attract good employees to come to Monument Academy. We know we can't pay like every single district can, and we know that there's some constraints that we have. And so in doing so, we also recognize that sometimes our benefits package has a lot to do with attracting staff and being able to keep them. And so it also fell under our operational development, because come again, when we need to look at what are the processes in reviewing these things every single year, there's usually a standard operating procedure with that. And so we want to make sure that that is happening, because this hasn't happened in the past. And so Krista has been really doing a good job of trying to create some of those SOPs, because when she came in, it wasn't there. And there was a lot of this happened in this year, and this happened in this year, and this didn't get tracked, or this was tracked in this system. And so rightfully so, she's been having to really kind of pull some of that together into a streamlined process. And in turn, switching from our payroll system had a whole nother part of that, moving from net checks to SDS, because SDS does have that employee portal that will clearly describe, and when teachers and staff are taking time off, it's tracked better than in a binder that she found in 3 different places when she came in as HR. So we can't just take people's word for it all the time, but we're gonna have to play. She's been really trying to work hard on gathering as much that she could find from our past years and listening to what our teachers have said, so that we can now just baseline this to say, this is this now moving forward. Okay? So Krista, that was long-winded, but I know it was a lot of background. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. So she's going to just highlight just so that everyone knows what are some of the essentials, and then different sections of the handbook that were changed, and acknowledgement and sign-off. So those are just a couple talking points so you guys know.
Okay, so first I want to point out that when employees do sign an agreement, it's an at-will employment agreement and not a contract. And so nothing is binding. So when it comes to paid leave, when it comes to everything like that, there is flexibility within the change, but it comes with information. And so that being said, to date back, we did want to get employment agreements out. And that was out of respect for the employees, to give them the opportunity to assess and analyze, is this going to be right for me? Is this going to be right for what I need to do for my family? And so that push to get employment agreements out, especially with the excitement of the salary raises and what it meant to show them how hard we worked, to let them know their value, even though value is never measured in compensation. It was one of those things. So I do also want to point out that the number of paid leave days is not different. And so 12 is the number of paid leave days. With that, I want to segue into some other parts, and then I'll backtrack into that leave. The code of conduct, it was stated at the last board meeting, but I do want to make sure that it is referenced in that code of conduct as far as grievances go, that it is the board policy 1518. The staff will get an electronic copy that will have a hyperlink so that they are able to go in there and they can see it as needed. I feel like that also limits the amount that they're reading through, because we do want them to be able to digest this and process this even before they sign off on an acknowledgement of receipt. That segues into that equal opportunity employment. So we did make sure that our equal pay for equal work was analyzed and assessed, because some of the unorthodox practices before did not have hourly employees at the same hourly rate. And so we were able to go in and make sure that every hourly employee was going to be paid at the same rate per their title and their job position. Then the harassment and discrimination, we actually took it just a little bit further. Josh Miller and I were able to go in and really define what that discrimination was beyond just sexual harassment and whatnot. These are just small changes that I just want to make you aware of. They're for the support and protection of our employees, but they are there, and they were changed slightly. Work hours and attendance. This is one of those things where it does differentiate between East and West, and so we just wanted to make it very clear the times and when staff is expected to arrive. This also helped us to set the expectation of when we would determine them late, but to also give them that guidance to make sure that they knew what the principals expected and what we needed for kids. This now leads us into benefits, and I do want to say what was put on the board agenda for tonight and shared. I did make a few tweaks and changes to the handout, and so I gave you guys the handout. I also want to reiterate and stress that this will go out to all staff tomorrow. This is going to give them time to read through it, process, and make sure they understand everything that we did to provide clarity, but also give them the opportunity to ask more. Glenn, Maureen, and I worked on this to attempt to put it into a bite-sized, digestible document. So going back, I do want to just quickly run through what these tables look like and what they represent. So that first table is actually a combination of two different handbooks, because last year's handbook was actually never truly solidified. And so one of the things that I had recognized at the very beginning of last year was that there was no sick leave that was given to staff. So everything prior to my arrival, at least, was all personal leave. But under the Healthy Family Workplace Act, we are required to give them at least 48 hours of sick leave. And that equates to 6 days. So even though the handbook did not state 6 days of sick leave, I went ahead and implemented that and gave that to them to make sure that we were compliant with the laws. That's that little asterisk right there. Next up was the maximum accrual. So with that, there was no limit to how much employees could accrue. At that time, it was also equated with monetary payout. So we had some employees who had accrued large amounts of paid time off. And speaking from a person who taught for many years, it's hard to take time off as a teacher because you have to make lesson plans, and sometimes it's more work than it's worth. But they did accrue up to, our highest right now accrual is 70 days. 70 days. Yes. And that poses a problem with when it comes to any sort of compensation or payout. But it's also one of those things that we would never take that from them. So that accrual and the service that they provided, that's theirs to keep. We recognize that personal leave is wages earned in compensation. The new laws have actually defined charter schools as a government entity, which has actually transitioned us to being required to pay out in a monetary sense and allowing them to keep it in compensation as time. But we also want to honor the people who were told, you're going to get paid out. And so none of their paid leave that they have accrued is going to be taken from them, and they will receive monetary payout to make sure that we are abiding by what we feel is important. And when we combed through this, there were 3 really big things: compliance with the law, conservative financial awareness, and ethics. And we wanted to make sure that that ethical piece was where we reassured our staff, you matter, and what you were told is upheld. That leading into the new handbook. So in order for us to start to make a policy that is within a realm of what's responsible and what is manageable, we had to cap that personal leave. The personal leave cap is 10 days, which is pretty standard. That 80-hour cap is set there for employees who are newer to keep those personal days. One of the things Joshua Miller and I talked about is when you put a cap on time, people are more apt to actually use it. And we do want our employees to know that that time is given to them in the form of compensation to take care of themselves. And that's really important for their mental health. That's really important for kids too. But we also understand that it's not that easy to take time off. So where we went with that is trying to find a way to make sure that we were then able to balance that out. So people who had accrued many, many, many hours and had accrued many, many days, it's not that we're taking anything from them. They're not being robbed of any days. We're just not allowing them to accrue anymore until they hit that limit. And that 80-hour limit, once they dip below that, the next calendar year, we will replenish up to the amount that they would acquire based off of what the handbook states. And so every other employee that is newer, of course, yes, they're going to get their accrued days. People who have met that cap, we just want to make sure that we're able to bring it into a realm that's manageable, but also not requiring them to use it. So one of the things that we're proposing is that grandfathered employees are people who have had given service to Monument Academy for 10 years plus. They are the ones who have accrued the most paid leave and most time off, and we want to honor that. And so upon separation of completion of the requirements of their employment agreement or retirement, we would pay them out that $50 a day, which was pretty standard across the board. Next up, we go to sick leave. So, and I don't have to read this for you, but I will let everybody know that it is also based on longevity. So in order for us to incentivize retention, annual accrual for people who have been here from 1 to 3 years get 2 days of personal and 10 days of sick. Annual accrual for people who have worked here for 4+ years will get 4 days of personal and 8 days of sick leave. Both total out to 12 days. Priorly, they were given 10 days. So this is a way in which we are able to give them more days. One of the reasons why this is really important is because bereavement now falls under sick leave provisions. And so giving them those extra days is saying, if something happens to your family or to your friends, bereavement then, when it falls under sick leave, it doesn't matter if it's your third cousin twice removed. You just take sick leave. All right, so one of the things Glenn and I really got into depth about was that sick leave. And so we are not required as an employer to actually pay out sick leave, but we also want to honor the people who show up every day. And they start to accrue these sick leave days. And so we were able to kind of think through a process, and we want to propose that people are able to acquire and accrue up to 60 work days, which is about 3 months of sick leave. And so if by any chance they were to need that time for personal reasons, they would be able to utilize that, and it would keep them protected and allow them to have that time off that is paid. So it doesn't hurt their family. With that being said, people who then accrue that and then are enter separation with us after the completion of an employment agreement or retirement, we would be able to pay them out up to 10 days at the full sub rate. And that's just to incentivize that it does matter that they show up every day. And it does matter that they stay with Monument Academy. The limit to that would be 5 years of service. And they wouldn't actually be able to even acquire up to 60 days without 5 years of service with the amount that we're giving them. And the amount that we're required to give them under the Healthy Family Workplace Act is actually 48 hours, and we are giving them more than that. Glenn was really fantastic at coming up with some great frequently asked questions, and to be very truthful and honest, a lot of his asked questions were questions that we thought they might not know to ask. And I think it's really important to take into consideration that they aren't versed on all the labor laws, and they aren't versed on leave. And so coming up with questions that they may not know to ask might resolve some of that anxiety of uncertainty. And so I'm going to go through these very, very quickly because I want to make sure that you guys have time to read, but we're going to give it to staff so they will also have time to read. But the first one being, why do we have sick leave now? Address that, right? Healthy Family Workplace Act. The next one, the new handbook looks like we actually get more total leave. Yes, you do. If you have not acquired the maximum limit. But everybody will acquire that sick leave. So last year with the 6 sick days, and then this year with either 8 or 10, the people who didn't use sick days last year will either have 14 or 16 days. I've worked at MA for many years. That's that grandfathered in policy that we're proposing of 10 years plus. Can I still use personal leave for any purpose? Absolutely. Personal leave has no provisions. There is nothing. You can take that personal leave for whatever you want. There's no requirement for you to even say why you're taking personal leave. Can I request time off? An hour at a time. So this became very tricky to track, and the solid answer is no. We have to hire subs on a half-day or full-day basis, so it's important for us to request that our employees take off either a half-day or a full-day. If I'm grandfathered for PTO, will I be able to get paid for unused PTO upon separation? Address this, yes, at $50 for every 8 hours. If I'm grandfathered for personal leave, do I have to cash out my balance above 10 days? No. So we are not asking anyone who is going to remain here, who has accrued that amount, to cash out any days. If they want to keep those days next year, you keep those days. We're not going to take days from you. That's not the point of this. The point of this is to say, if you are in that realm of grandfathered people, yes, you will get, and we will honor that payout at the end of separation, but you get to roll over those days as you wish. And that is actually to respect and honor that compensation in the form of time. What happens if I run out of personal PTO or sick leave? This is where, and I'm going to let Glenn elaborate on this more, but this is where that fear of what happens if I get sick, or what happens if something bad happens that I have to be able to utilize leave that falls under the provisions of sick leave. And there are many, many options. And again, I will let Glenn speak to a sick bank and the way in which that operates and the difficulty of management in that and the requirements of HIPAA. But I also want to say that beyond that, we're going to do the best that we can as an organization to take care of our people. And there are a lot of other things that they can do. And so, along with a potential donation of time, not a sick leave bank, they also have access to long-term disability and short-term disability through para, and then they are able to utilize FMLA if they've also expended all of their paid leave. How come you only pay out personal leave at the $50 a day rate, which my actual daily rate is more? There's actually no industry requirement on how much you're supposed to pay out because we're not even required to at this point. But we have to be conscientious about where we are financially. And to give perspective, someone who has 70 days who's paid out at $50 a day, that is up near almost $4,000. It's about $38.50. And so just keeping that in mind and digesting that, we're honoring those people who still acquired those days and are going to get that chunk of change. But we're also making sure that we're doing what is right for kids, and that's staying financially responsible. Next, we have the school used to be required by law to pay out personal leave. I touched on that. Due to the past laws, the labor laws, charter schools did fall under that government entity, which does not require us to monetarily pay out leave. The fact that we're honoring that grandfather system is just because we respect and we value people who have served Monument Academy for many, many years. I appreciate you recognizing a higher rate for the payout of accrued unused sick leave. How did you arrive at the full day sub rate for this payout? So we just wanted to do what was pretty common and across the board. No, is it their daily rate? But it is a standard rate that shows them how much we appreciate and what they're doing, because if they had taken that day, we would have paid us up. And so that's just to say, thank you. We want our teachers who are qualified and wonderful and professional and know what they're doing to be the ones who are in front of our kids. I still appreciate every single sub who takes the time to be there to support and make sure that they're getting that educational fruit as well. I don't think that my leave balances are right from previous years, since I know that I took leave on several occasions that never reduced my leave balances. What do we do about that? So one of the things that I did discover was teachers were taking, and NTAs were taking time off in Ready Sub, but they weren't the ones who were responsible for taking it off in SDS. The previous HR was going in and doing that for them, but not all of their time was actually being deducted from SDS. And so they, although they were ethically taking time off through Ready Sub, those days and hours were not being deducted in SDS, but that was through no fault of their own. And so that being said, we're still going to honor those days that is reported in SDS, but we would love for people, going forward, if you notice, hey, I took 2 days off and I didn't see a deduction, just out of good faith and good ethics, just to let us know. We're not perfect, and SDS is a manual system, and we're going to be monitoring a lot. And so just to do what is right and what is good for them too. Just let us know. What happens if I run out of personal PTO and sick leave and I need to take a personal day or just a short-term sick day? You may take any day you need to past your point of expended sick or personal leave. It's just that there will be a deduction in pay. And so we wouldn't say, absolutely not. I am very, very sorry that you have a stomach bug, but you're done with sick leave. So you got to show up. So we will most definitely make sure that they know that they can take that leave as needed. With that being said, I loved Glenn's idea to put this in that digestible format, if you will. We want to make sure that staff knows that we are going to be meeting with the West Campus on the 18th of October, and we will be meeting with the East Campus on the 19th of October. That being said, we want them to have time to digest and process this, and we want them to utilize these questions that may prompt other questions so that they're able to come to us and they're able to feel like I am confident in what it is that they are doing. And I know that they are doing this because they're truly pouring into not just us as employees, but also the school as a whole. This is also, the meetings will occur before the board passes the proposed handbook as a whole, but also the leave in particular. Moving on, I will toss it to Glenn if you want to touch on sick banks and all that good stuff.
Good evening, board, community. So many of you know, between my 32 years with District 11 and my work with CDE, working with 176 school districts all over the state of Colorado. I just came from a training in beautiful Lamar, Colorado. I've seen a lot of handbooks and a lot of different leave policies, and there's a couple of things that you should be aware of. First of all, we as a school and a community want to offer a competitive leave policy. We want it to be in conjunction with their salary and their health benefits and their pension plan, a competitive package that attracts and retains high quality staff. That's of course what we aspire to and what we want. But we do have some constraints, and we need to look at these challenges that we're dealing with, not just in the context of Monument Academy, but also in the context of the charter school community and the K-12 community across the state of Colorado. I came from a heavily unionized background in D11 with teachers, and I will tell you that we did not give more leave than this. We struggled with sick leave bank because of HIPAA violations, and we finally, I don't work there anymore, but I think they're finally in the process of discontinuing the sick leave bank. We have thought, well, what about that person that has a tragic car accident or an illness that really requires to take a significant amount of leave? And we're going to propose to you that we have a donated hardship leave for those situations where our community of MA staff can help them with that situation. That's worked very well in D11 and in other school districts. While the industry has changed across the country more towards PTO, paid time off, and away from sick leave, the combination of sick leave and PTO works very well. And it's very common to not pay out PTO in the K-12 industry and only pay sick leave. And usually that happens only upon retirement, and the range of what that's paid at is all over the board, but it's never 100% of per diem. Even in D11, in a heavily unionized environment, it's at 75% of per diem, but they cap it to the most senior employees. So not everybody qualifies. And if you don't qualify, you just have to wait until you do qualify or never get it. The sub-rate pay is the most common rate. It's what D20 does. I think it's what Lewis Palmer does. It's kind of the K-12 industry standard in Colorado. And then one final piece. So we as a leadership team have looked at this proposed handbook and leave policy in conjunction with our financial situation. Of course, we're trying to honor our obligation on our buildings, and that's part of the piece of the puzzle that we have to consider. And you need to know that GASB, which is our governing board for accounting, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, is promulgating a new rule that goes into effect next year that's going to require us to book the liability related to accrued unused leave. And so whatever this board adopts is going to end up hitting our income statement and our balance sheets for next year. So it's a serious matter, and we have to make sure that that fits into the big puzzle of how we maintain the financial viability of our school, especially given our enrollment circumstances that we're going through right now. So we've tried to take all that into context, including employee morale and our welfare of our employees, because certainly we do not want an employee to be without coverage. Krista mentioned it. In addition, para has long-term disability. There are other options outside of MA for coverage in the event of a long-term illness situation. So we think this is a nice blend of all those needs of the health and welfare of our employees, the competitive compensation package, the financial viability of our school, and industry practice. And this is a nice compromise of all those pieces. Normally I wouldn't be that much involved with this, but Krista and Kim asked if I could kind of chip in, knowing that I have all this experience. I ran the insurance committee at D11. I was heavily involved. And so I think that's a perspective that will help you as you evaluate, is this the right plan for Monument Academy? And with that, I'll be glad to sit down.
I want to piggyback on just a couple of things that he said. So I also want to say that a sick leave bank requires an anonymous committee to decide who actually gets sick leave. And it's important by HIPAA laws that the person who is requesting sick leave, that their identity remain private. The difference with that, and in order for you to be able to pull from a sick leave and be eligible for that leave, you have to donate into it. The difference with that donation is that it's actually the person who is revealing their medical health and their medical information, and it's to the discretion of the people to donate however much they want. Also, people who are coming in brand new who don't have that much accrued personal leave or sick leave, that's hard to give up a day. And to know, hey, something might happen. And this also opens it up where these new employees would be able to get that security and that safety feeling. So that also being said, a lot of the employees have been like, wait, but I donated and I gave up a day. It was very loosely tracked. And so one of the things that we talked about was just doing a in good faith give back. So people who said, I donated a day. And at that time, it was personal leave that they were donating into something that would be actionable as sick leave. And so it would be donated back to them as personal leave. I'm not going to say donated. It'd be given back to them as personal leave. Let's see, very quickly, IT data security. One of the things that we've been really working on is making sure that our data and security and everything that we process, including email and all of the communications, is secure under the Monument Academy web of protection. By the way, I just made that up. That is one of the things that's really important for us because we are giving our kids technological devices and we are giving them access to the internet, and we are making sure that everybody is aware of their responsibility in their technological use and what it is that they are surfing, et cetera, but also how they're monitoring kids' use of technology. Moving on. Social media. So this was something that actually came up before. So this is something that I think we're all pretty passionate about, is keeping our kids safe and making sure that we're also protecting our staff. And so it was added into the handbook that staff members cannot have any social media contact with students. This does not mean that they cannot have contact with parents on social media, but they cannot have contact with students. We are also recommending to staff that they not have contact with parents through personal communications via text or their phone. Exactly. And that was the beauty of that communication piece with Parent Square, is that parents are in the loop. And lastly, that personal communication between staff and students, it's not just to protect kids, it is to protect our teachers, and it's to protect our staff. And then lastly, the other thing that we did add in that I pointed out last time is we are following D38's policy on volunteers, and we are requiring all volunteers who have student contact to go through a background check. It's pretty logical, but we just want to make sure that we're doing everything we can within our capacity to keep kids safe. Lastly, there were questions that came in from the board that we were able to go through. And Kim, I'm going to let you step up after this, but I did want to address some of the questions that the board asked concerning the handbook and concerning leave particularly. So that question about, will it impact employees negatively? No. Employees who have accrued more days than the capped amount of 10 days may keep their days. They may use their personal days as needed, and grandfathered individuals will get that payout. And I just wanted to reiterate that because that's an important question. From my understanding and reading through this, it looks like this is a net positive for the staff. It's a good thing for staff. We worked really hard to make sure that this wasn't something that hurt them, it helped them, but it helped the school as well. And then lastly, how do you determine the difference between sick leave and personal leave? This is actually in section 1.6 or 111. It's in section 111 where it has it listed out all of the provisions for sick leave. So if there's ever any question of the doubt, it is underneath there, and that's not an MA policy, that's a Colorado labor law policy. And so they are allowed to use their personal leave. We will not expect them to use sick leave for any other reason if it doesn't follow under that provision. That's all I got. Do you guys have any questions?
Yeah. Hi, Kim. Yeah, I've got just two quick questions. One, do we have an estimate of what the accrued PTO liability might be that could possibly get booked to the financial statements?
We do. So first, only 15 employees have hit that 10 years of service. We have, within those, we've got about, it's a rough estimate around, I want to say, because I actually had it in a different document, and I actually want to get you guys that exact number, but it's up near about 350 days. Times 50. And I'm not going to attempt to do that math because I taught English. Yes. And to clarify, the short-term disability is through PARA. The long-term disability is through New York Life, which is what we offer.
Okay, thank you.
Of course.
Then one additional question, just kind of related to the financing of all this. if we're sort of offering this sick leave and PTO time, sort of expecting and encouraging employees to take it annually, have we budgeted adequately for the substitutes that'll be needed in the budget as is?
So I want to say first, I think the panic that triggered that, hey, I need to take time off, is thinking that they weren't going to get to keep their days, and they weren't going to get to roll over those days. And so saying, no, your days are your days. And this really speaks to the people who really accumulated a lot of them. They have every right to decide what they would like to use. Within the handbook, I do want to point out that it does say that 10 sick days is about standard. That being said, teachers in general, the work to take time off is far more than the work to do their job. And I think that initial gut-wrenching, well, I must use my days because it's compensation in the form of time. They aren't going to have any of those days taken away from them. And the sick days are going to be given to them just as it would across the board. With that, I can't speak to what we budgeted with the subs and whatnot, but I think that that alleviating the fear of it being taken away is going to alleviate the feeling of need to take time off.
I will say, and Glenn, you can chime in too, at your initial answer, as of right now, no. We wouldn't have all of that sub-pay planned into it. Because it's one of those that if we ended up having a teacher take all that, we also try to look at when we are planning how much sub-pay we put into our budget. We typically look at the year previous to say, okay, well, what percentage of that are we going to use again? We keep it the same, and then we maybe, up that a percentage. So when looking at the amended budget this year, and when we're doing some of that work time, I think that's a valid question to ask, without a doubt, and we can definitely look at that. Glenn and I and Krista and him would be the ones to really kind of hone in on that and what's happening with the budget. If this happened, then we would have a little bit of cushion. But I would say right now, if we were to have all those people take that and we would need the subs, I don't know if we would find the subs, because that's the other hard part. But I'm answering you honestly that no, we may not have that amount as of right now.
So I don't have a question, but I do have a comment, which, I just wanted to thank the team for putting together the two tables and the FAQs. I found it so helpful and drove to a lot of clarity, even in my mind, about the changes. So thank you for the effort there and for the presentation tonight.
Well, and I want to thank you guys for pumping the brakes. And I think sometimes when you are passionate about supporting staff and doing what's good for them, it's also really good to have people who are on the outside who say, wait, slow down before we go fast. And I appreciate that reciprocation of true concern and attention to detail. It really helped to make sure that the team was able to put together something that was comprehensive and fine-tuned in a really good way. And so I appreciate the fact that you guys were able to do that in collaboration with us.
I have a quick question. You guys said on number 12 on the FAQs that, historically we've had less than desirable controls over leave accounting. And I definitely don't want to get into the weeds of you guys explaining exactly, but I just want the board to have assurance that that is taken care of moving forward.
I like the way you think. I would agree. So one of the things that we decided to do with that is give those employees access to SDS so that they are not only taking their time off in ReadySub, but they are the ones who are responsible for taking their time off in SDS. Because when you are asking HR to monitor the ReadySub reports and go in and take that time off, sometimes it's innocent human error. And sometimes it's oversight. It's much easier because many hands make light work. And we have such an ethical staff that they are able to really monitor their own time, which is going to make that to where there's accountability. So when they request time off in ReadySub, they're also requesting time off in SDS. That actually ensures several different great practices because we know who's in the building when we check ReadySub every day. But we also are able to really count on them to go in and make sure that they are taking the days that they're taking. And then we're able to do an audit every month.
Let me add something with that. Please. Also, with accountability on that side is when a teacher or a staff member puts in time, there is an approval process. So it's not like they may put in the time, but it's still going to have to go through an administrator has to still approve that. Even to my point, when I put in my information to SDS at New Summit, it's not just the business manager. The actual principal looks at my time, and there's 2 people who approve my time off to make sure that it's falling within the realms of that there's, one, communication with the principal, because they ultimately have the approval or veto process, right, of whether or not, hey, this is right before a vacation, and we typically have a lot of people, you can't find subs typically, but right before, let's say, Christmas break. And if people take a whole week off before Christmas break, and we have a big group of that, then we may end up with nobody to watch kids. So we have to lay out some parameters, and there has to be an approval process with a couple people so that it's a checks and balances. And I will say that wasn't happening in the past. Principals knew, but maybe they didn't. Maybe they, and with leadership changes, sometimes that can change. And it can be a surprise to leadership when there isn't that checks and balances. And when she says we have an ethical team now, we do. And I truly believe, but we can't just always count on that. There has to still be checks and balances.
So if I understand correctly, I understand they have to have approved by their principal their time off, but that doesn't mean whether it be human error or somebody that's less than ethical, which I'm not saying there is any. I'm just saying a good system has the stop gaps for that. That still doesn't tell me that they're counting their time.
So
Whether that be like just a genuine mistake or not, anyway.
Right. So a couple of things. So with ReadySub, and they have to go in, we pay our subs manually. So we're pulling the ReadySub report every time to make sure that we've got that. The other flip side to that is that we're able to double, triple check that time has been taken off in SDS monthly. Because if someone doesn't show up to work, Mr. Walker is going to be like, they didn't show up to work, and I didn't approve that time off. Now, that being said, legally, we can't force them to wait for an approval for sick leave, but that's where when we're able to track it, and there is no such thing as a perfect system, but there's a better way to do it. And that's where we're going to utilize that, where the employee is responsible for putting it into 2 different systems of their own volition and their own responsibility. That also increases accountability for our employees. And accountability in the way in which it increases the ownership and the investment in the way in which they're taking time off. Mr. Walker, Mr. Vinchetto, and Mr. Kennington are going to know if someone's not there. That's going to help to reinforce that we're able to look at that. And, Dawn and I are going to have to look at those reports monthly because we pay our subs out manually. We also go in and we make sure that time deduction happens manually. And so there's a lot of combing through, and that's actually where that RACI plan is going to come into an excellent play, because we're working on fine-tuning that RACI to make sure that we have a responsible party and an accountable party, a contributor, and an informed. And I just think when you put those practices into place, they supersede the person and they go into the policy and the position. And so I really feel like all of the things that we're doing to streamline and to make sure that this is the way we do it to ensure it is ethical and it's practical. But yeah, I mean, there's no such thing as a perfect system, but I do think this is going to be highly effective, and I think it's going to be very responsible.
Thank you all. To reiterate Ms. Hoyta's statement, I appreciate you putting together these summaries. They were helpful. I understand that the team offered individualized staff teacher meetings. How many staff teacher members have taken you up on those meetings?
So actually, I want to say, I always have a full day blocked off at West, and I have a full day blocked off at East. So Tuesdays are my West day, Thursdays are my East day, and I have appointment slots so that teachers can actually take an appointment slot that's conducive to them, so that I'm not trying to hit or miss. So they can always come in and they can make an appointment with me so that we can personally go through things. I've had about 10. The majority of them have been at West. And they have, their questions are, how much do I have? What does this really mean? And how are you guys taking care of us? And it's been nice to be able to sit down. I think that really provided that clarity. And I have those links on my signature and on every email, because I do want to make myself available to staff. And I also want to, and within that, when they make an appointment, they can put in the premise of what it is that we're going to discuss in the meeting, because I also want to make sure that I'm prepared so that I value their time and I'm able to give them the answers that they seek.
What has been the general sentiment of the 10 that you have sat down with?
You know, I think any time, once again, compensation in any format, whether it be time, whether it be money, people come in and they need to protect what's theirs because it's personal to them. And so I think some of it has been apprehension and skepticism. And I actually appreciate that, because I always feel like that leads to honest conversation. And I've told many, many people, I have no issues with somebody coming to me and saying, I don't like how you did that. I don't love how that's written. My character I will protect. But what it is that I produce, I look for feedback. And so what I've seen is that their questions have been very individual, but they want to know, how are you valuing? How are you showing us that this is not going to hurt us? And I think that I was able to actually have this handout, and it was no secret because it was a draft. And there was flexibility in it, and we kept saying, and this is proposed, and it will happen if it is approved. But I think that being able to take it from a big group where many different questions are coming in and questions are perceived to be answered by other questions, if you will, it really did de-escalate the fear and the concern. And I empathize with that. So it was actually, I felt like it was such a good time for them to connect and to see how it affected them on a personal level.
I appreciate that. So that offer still stands then for teachers and staff to set individualized meetings?
All year long. It's been since the beginning of the year, and I will keep that in place. That also allows me to make sure that I prioritize 2 days a week, at one day here, one day there, because the other 3 days, stuff happens, and I do have to, I fly like a butterfly. I go where I'm needed, and that's very important to me, because I need them to know that there is a component to that human relation truly, and to let them know that they have somebody that they can come to And if I don't know the answer, I will find it.
A few more questions. On October 18th and 19th, at West Campus and East Campus, respectively, 4 p.m., that's opened up to all staff and teachers. Who will be leading the three of you? Okay.
And I also want to say that if someone at West can't make it on the 18th, they can come to East on the 19th, and vice versa. You know, I want to make sure that we realize that 105 goes both ways, and they are more than welcome to make it work for them. So a West teacher or a West staff member doesn't feel like I missed out because it was the 18th. Come on over to East. Let's make sure that you have access to that because we are one MA.
So I very much agree with a lot of the sentiment from you three that this is a big deal, and we need to make sure we get this right as a board, which leads me to my next question. If I wanted to listen in as a fly on the wall at those meetings on the 18th and 19th, would there be any objections?
I would love for you to be there. I think it's really important for you to also hear the voices, because this is the thing, is we all lead with servant hearts. And everybody's voice matters, but it's also one of those things where your perspective as someone who is not in the creation of something, it's really valuable. And I think that that's the flip side to it. Teachers, staff members, everybody in this building, whatever position they take, their voice matters and their concerns matter, but also any celebrations matter too. So things that they like the feedback is great, and it's great for you guys to hear too.
On October 26th, we will have our budget work session. I would propose an opportunity during that time frame, if we do have further questions as a board, understanding we will not be taking any action that evening, that we can at least have some further conversation and dialogue prior to our November meeting.
I think that's really important, and what I will make sure that I have for you is the exact number of accrued PTO that is going to go under the proposed 10 years of service, so that you guys have that exact number of how many hours we could potentially be paying out.
As of right now, what is being told to our staff and teachers, we're just working under the old handbook until a new handbook is approved by the board, and that would lead, I see the shaking of heads, yes.
Ish.
When the board approves a new handbook, will it take effect immediately that month, or will it be retroactive? Okay, so it won't be retroactive to the start of the school year on July 1.
What Donna and I have done is we went and we found all the accrued leave that has been before they took any leave this year. So everything that we've calculated right now is the leave that they had from the previous fiscal year. What we're doing is we're calculating how much they would accrue if in fact this was passed, just to make sure that if they came to us, we would be able to say, this is potentially what it's going to look like. We're going to take the Ready Sub report, which is what we're going to have to utilize to do the deductions of time. That's where the 12 days was put in their employment agreement, and that number won't change. There's that caveat then in the handbook that says if you have surpassed the accrual, that's where you won't necessarily add to your bank, but you won't lose from it. Does that help answer your question?
To some extent. I will certainly be reviewing some of the update that you provided at the beginning of the meeting. I had another question, and it slips my mind right now. Well, at this point, then, either myself or another board member, if they would like, will likely be at the October, I won't say likely, I will commit to at least being at one of those, because I would like to hear some of the questions before we bring this back to the board. I appreciate you, Ms. McClellan, really emphasizing the fact that we don't have to take action on this tonight. There was a little bit of uncertainty there, and I think the board needed to hear that, and I absolutely agree that we need to take our time in reviewing this further. And I appreciate all the work that you guys have put into this. I do have one other question. If this law was passed in 20, what was the reason that they gave us till 23 before implementing it or expecting us to implement it?
So it was, the Healthy Family Workplace Act was passed in 2020 as a result of COVID.
Right.
And so that was actually, that 48 hours, that was put into play.
That was the emergency leave portion
Correct.
during COVID.
And it was implemented in August 2020. The state laws actually also shifted with that 80 hours that they were giving to people for COVID relief, but we actually left that premise in there just in case there was ever another pandemic, and we put it under the caveat of such. The new labor laws that were passed in June really did actually incorporate a charter as a government entity, because a charter was actually not seen as a government entity because of our semi-autonomy. And so that was one of those things where it changed the way in which we had to compensate. And it's one thing about labor laws, it feels like they are ever changing and you're keeping up on them because you're also operating under Colorado labor laws, but also national labor laws. So you're trying to make sure you're meeting the FLSA. And there's a lot of moving parts, which is why I really appreciated all the different perspectives. And Joshua Miller was exceedingly helpful.
That's all my questions. Board, are there anything further? Are there any objections to laying this over until November? All right. Hearing none, then we will move on. Yes, so our next item on the agenda will be our September 30th, 2023 financial statements. Mr. Gustafson, just so you're aware, we skipped over the Chief Financial Officer report and the Finance Committee report for the board, and would just like to group all these together. At this time, we'll just turn it over to you, and you present however you see best on all this.
Yes, sir. Thank you. What I'd like to do is quickly review the monthly financials. The quarterlies are also in there. We do both monthlies and quarterlies on quarter end because the quarterlies are required by state statute. Otherwise, we would just use the monthlies. I find the monthlies more detailed and more useful. I'd like to walk through those if you don't mind. I think you have those in your board packet. And then when I'm done with that, I'd be glad to take questions on that and then give you a quick CFO update about what's going on in the world of school finance and everything else. So starting on the PDF page 3 is the general fund. Remember, the general fund is our operating fund of the school, and it combines all 3 schools. Remember when you adopted your budget this year that we now are keeping track of our schools separately as elementary, middle, and high, and we're doing the accounting for that separately. But the general fund on this tab is combining all 3 schools. The whole format throughout the report, on the left side of the box is the status of the reports as of September 30th. The right side of the box is year to date. Of course, September is just 1 month, and our target for 1 month is 100% of budget because it's our budget divided by 12. The year to date, the target would be 25% because we're a quarter of the way through the year. And so what you can see is we have a few line items going over budget for the month. Those include the school administration account, that's the principal accounts. We also have, I think they left the mic on. We're getting some feedback. The business services account, the school administration account is only over by 6%. That's normal. We have fluctuations that go throughout the year that happens. The business service account is over significantly for the month. That's because we're still going through the process of the SDS conversion from NetChecks to SDS for payroll. And it is taking longer than we thought. There's a lot more details involved with that in terms of training staff, developing training materials, getting all the data converted and implemented. But we're making progress. I was happy to see that this month's payroll in September, we only had 1 bounce back of a direct deposit, and that was because the employee gave us the wrong bank account number. It wasn't the fault of the school. So we're doing good, and the team is learning the system and coming along. And so I think we're only about 1 month away. Our next step of the puzzle is to finish the training materials and get the leave accruals into SDS. And then once that's done, I think we'll be really close. We're also a little bit over on maintenance and operation. That's because of some expenses related to the modulars that we're finalizing. So we went over a little bit for the month, and we're also over on central services. That's IT and HR, and that's because of the way our IT provider bills us, and they came in a lump sum. Now, if you look for the month, our total expenditures for the general fund were 102.74. So we're 2.74% above budget. But if you look year to date, we're below 25% at 23.38%. Now, I want to make a very important distinction here for the board. Our budget that we adopted was based on an enrollment of 1,180 kids. That means both the revenue budget and the expenditure budget, because we have a balanced budget. Well, our actual enrollment is hovering around 1,100, plus or minus. We're in the count day window, changes every day. And so we adopted a budget that is approximately 80 kids too many, and the revenue associated with 80 students, when you count the district flow through from Lewis Palmer and the mill levy override, is about $1.3 million. It's a significant number. That also means our expenditure budget is overstated by $1.3 million. Now, I don't want you to panic about that. That seems like a big number, and it is. But the good news about that is that Krista and Kim put the brakes on some staffing hires as soon as we saw that the enrollment wasn't coming in. So we have several unfilled positions that add up to a significant amount of money. We also know that we budgeted a significant amount of money for the lease purchase of the parking lot at West. That, unfortunately, is going to have to go. We're going to have to cut that to be able to balance the budget. And then we also have additional revenue because Kim and I were able to go in with Lewis Palmer after the budget adoption, unfortunately, because of their schedule. We didn't budget all the special ed money and the reduced admin fees that Lewis Palmer was charging us. And it makes me a little bit sad that last year was the first year we ever got special ed revenue. We got over $350,000. And when you think about that, for some reason, neither Monument Academy asked nor did Lewis Palmer offer that special ed revenue, historically. So this was the first year we ever qualified for that revenue. That where we received it was 22-23, and of course we'll get it in 23-24 as well. So the reason I share that with you is I didn't want to have a quarterly financial statement that is based on a budget that is too high for our 1,180 kids. So I haven't changed the budget because that's the board adopted budget. I can't change that until the board changes it. But I changed our revenue because Lewis Palmer flows revenue through to us every month. I went through and changed the revenue in September to retroactively reflect a lower amount, and I booked the difference to a liability that doesn't show on the income statement, basically saying, hey, we have to pay this back to Lewis Palmer. And it's about $100,000 a month. So when they true up with us in November or December, we're going to see immediate cash outflow of about $500,000 or $600,000 when they do that. But in the meantime, we're investing that money. We're earning interest on that money. I talked to Brett. I actually asked him, I said, hey, we're not going to be anywhere close to 1,180. Do you want to make the adjustment early? And he said, no, it's fine. We'll do it once you certify your pupil count. So I appreciated that Lewis Palmer said that to us. But I wanted you to know these revenues that are in the right-hand box already reflect the revised revenues that we're actually going to get. Now, if you look at the year-to-date column, the left-hand column of the right-hand box, you'll notice that our net income is $65,000, $65,714. That's for all three schools, and that's based on the revised revenue. Now, we'll still have some administrative cost reductions related to the true-up and other things, but I felt good about that. With the revised budget, we're still in the positive. So that's great news for us. It's still going to be a challenge, but when you think about the staffing vacancies, some of our other savings on administrative costs, you think about the additional revenue from special needs and other categorical programs that flow through, and our phenomenal interest income, we went from earning $1,800 a month to last month earning $18,000 in a month. We're going to be okay. It's not going to be painless. We're going to have some challenges, but we're going to be okay. And so I crunched really fast. I feel like I'm talking really loud. Is there an echo? I crunched really fast to get this for you today. I don't want you ever to expect financials on the 5th of the month. Normally, I can't do that. It just got lucky with the timing of month end on the weekend that I was able to get it done and get it out to you. So with that said, we're starting with, we got a $65,000 profit. I hate to use the word profit, but excess of revenues over expenditures in the general fund. If you also look at our cash in the blue box, you can see where our cash was on June 30th, where we were diversified. Well, President Graham went with me over to First National. Our certificate of deposit matured, and that was earning 0.8 of 1%. And we got a cashier's check for those funds, immediately got that working into our main primary investment account, a Colo Trust. And you can see I'm carrying a fairly substantial amount in Colo Trust right now. Remember, that's one day in time. At various times of the month, I may have $500,000 in the bank, depending on checks we're cutting. Remember, we're cutting checks for the recirculation project. Last month alone was over $500,000. So it just depends on the day of the month what that balance is. On September 30th, it was minus 55,000. We were not overdraft, okay? We pool our cash between the general fund and the preschool fund. The preschool fund had over $100,000. We pool our cash. It's in the same bank account, but we separate it for funds. So we're not overdraft. That's a normal thing for school districts. And then we keep a little money in the Integrity Money Market account. I also have the footnotes that explain the variances. I'm not going to go through those in the interest of time. You can do that at your convenience. The next page, the first page shows it by program. That's how CDE classifies our expenditures. Instruction, business services, central services, facilities. The next page does it by object. Those are things that boards are usually more comfortable with. Salaries, benefit, professional services, which is consultant, property services, which includes utilities, supplies, capital outlays. Same numbers, just sorted a different way, and you can see that all of our numbers, except for other services and supplies and materials, are below the 25% threshold, and other objects. The reason for that is we do our heaviest purchasing of curriculum at the start of the school year before the kids come. So it's natural that we have heavy expenditures. The one we would be worried about is if salary and benefits were over 25%, and you can see clearly they're not. If I go down to the next page, we have graphs of the month-to-date, year-to-date of the general fund, so you could kind of see the various components of our revenue. And then the next page is our expenditures, comparing to budget. And then the next page is the preschool fund. Christy Hayes manages the preschool fund for us. We are also down a little bit in enrollment at preschool. We budgeted 74 kids, we're at 58. Now that changes much more frequently, and we don't have a single count day. So that will fluctuate from month to month. So that's not nearly as concerning. My expectation is that we will be back closer to 70. That's what Christy told me. And you can see for the month, we have a net income in the preschool fund of $57,000 as of September 30th, and that's on a much smaller fund. So that's pretty good that we're able to keep that in that situation. And notice that their cash on hand in the preschool fund, because we pooled out with the general fund, is almost $200,000. Again, same bank account at Integrity, just pooled between the two different funds. The next fund that we have is the Foundation Fund. The Facilities Corp Fund. The Facilities Corp is the entity that financed the bonds for the West Campus. That's the way charter schools and public traditional schools have to do it in order to issue certificates of deposit. And so that fund acts as a flow-through. They literally capture our funding that normally would go to Lewis Palmer and then us at the state level and direct it straight to our trustee, which is BOK Financial. And so part of our revenue there, they call it intercept because they intercept that money and they send it to the trustee. That $232,000 is really per pupil revenue. Now, the only expenses we have for the Facilities Corp are the debt service on those bonds. You could see the total debt service of those bonds in the budget column is $922,000. We won't pay that debt service. We pay it semi-annually, and those payments are due in October and April. So in October, you'll actually see some transactions. We also have to pay our trustees some banking fees related to those funds. And you can see our trustee balances. These are not managed by me, but managed by the trustee. We have a bond principal fund that builds up until it's enough to pay for the bonds. And you can see we already have more than $470,000, which is our bond payment this year. The interest fund, which isn't quite enough yet, it'll get up to $451,000, and they'll pay that debt service to those people that own our bonds, which, by the way, the one entity that owns most charter school bonds in Colorado is the Colorado Bond Shares. Maybe you've seen that with grandkid accounts or things like that. It's a double tax exempt bond fund. It's very common in Colorado. And then we have a bond reserve fund, that's a year of debt service, and we have a repair and replacement fund for the West Campus of $122,000. So all that's held in trust for a specific purpose. The next fund is the foundation fund. The foundation is what financed the building we're sitting in and operates exactly the same as the Facilities Corp, different entity, foundation versus Facilities Corp, but same concept, different trustee, UMB versus BOK. Not sure why the powers that be decided to go with a different trustee, although quite honestly, UMB is the dominant player in this market, not BOK, although I really enjoy working with both of them. And you can see, same concept, intercept money, and it's bigger because the debt service on this campus is bigger. We pay about $1.8 million a year of principal and interest on this building. Our intercept on it through 3 months is $458,000. And look at the interest income we're earning on just that fund, $16,000, which ends up going into our principal and interest funds. And even the bond reserve, which we're required to keep and can only access in the event of a default, it's at 50% of our debt service. That's because that's the trust requirement. It's not because we chose that, that's the trust requirement. And so that fund's doing phenomenally well, earning interest, everything's going great in there. And then finally is the Student Activity Fund. That's where we keep track of all the clubs and activities and even some of the sports of the school. People pay fees, they donate money, goes into the account, and then it's spent on that specific purpose. We treat it almost like a trust account where literally we have about 50 different accounts. We have one for the drama club, one for the track club, one for the arts club, all in separate accounts designated in their name where we keep track of it. It's a lot of work. Diane spends a lot of time on it. She crunched her schedule just to help me get this done for October 5th, but it's very important work because it's the kids' money, and so we take special attention for that. And then finally, I am going to go to what I really enjoy is the most important part of the financial statements. You go past the graphs for the different funds, and you get to the school-by-school analysis in the optional supplemental information. I find this the most interesting. This is where we actually allocate the real revenues and expenses as adjusted for the revenues by school. And what you can see, I'll just jump straight to the bottom line. In total, these add up to the first page we went through for the general fund. When you look in total, you can see that Monument Academy West, the elementary, has an excess of revenue over expenditures. In the private sector, we'd call that net income or profit of $73,000. So that's a great place to be as of September 30th. The middle school is $214,000 because they have more kids. Remember, one of the things I have to do is allocate all the common costs of this building, the utilities, the maintenance. I have to allocate it between the middle school and the high school, and I do that based on enrollment. And the high school is in the red by $222,000. Now remember, we always net middle and high school together, and so you could see if we netted those two together, we'd have a net loss of $8,000, which on our size budget is practically break even. And so we're doing really well. Sorry, my voice is hoarse. I've been training all day, talking all day. But that's pretty good. They're at break even through September 30th with the adjusted revenues. So I feel good about that. Remember, the high school is always the most expensive level for any school district, any school, because the nature of a full curriculum of athletics, all the other activities that go on, and combined with low enrollment, only 114, 15 kids, they don't have the economies of scale to cover those costs of the building. And so that's why you'll always see those. So we're breaking those out separately because we think it's very helpful. But for all of our bond reporting, all that other reporting, we combine those two, and they wouldn't actually see it segregated between middle and high school. So I feel great about where we are. And by the way, the last page shows it by object code, so you can see where the different line items are going. And you can see the one big line item that's in the red is our purchase services. That's all of our consulting agreements and non-supplies and materials types of things. So I feel great about our financials, where we're at. I'm really pleased I was able to get this to you by the 5th of the month. We really had to crunch our schedules to get that to you, but I wanted to make sure it was on this board agenda. And we already met with the Finance Committee, and I would be glad to answer any questions about the financials before I go into the CFO report.
That was excellent. Glenn, if you could just give one point of clarification to the board and the community. I know you mentioned regarding the $500,000 we've paid out for the recirculation road. That money goes out, and then we submit for reimbursement. But I wanted to see if you could just clarify.
Sure. Thank you, President Graham. The recirculation project is a major project, and of course it's impacting us, the bank, the dentist office, the vision clinic, all that. The way those agreements were made, and I think President Graham did a tremendous amount of work on that, is that they bill us, we write the check, we get reimbursed by Pikes Peak RTA. And so there is a delay between when we pay and when PPRTA pays us, but we act as the agent for that because some of that's on our property, is my understanding, is why we have to do that, and so the government can't pay for it. So in the end, we're held harmless. It's a zero net impact to our books. We don't even run it through the income statement. It runs through our balance sheet. But you need to know that not only did President Graham spend probably countless hours on helping to put together that deal, now we have to put together all the invoices, pay them, cut the checks, submit it for reimbursement. And, you know, I have to be honest with you, the last bill to Wildcat Construction, which is the major contractor for that project, was $523,000. So I don't want to float $523,000 of Monument Academy's money. So what I have to do is get everything ready, submit it for reimbursement, which means we've cut the check, but then we kind of sit on the check until right before reimbursement date. Then we deliver the check to Wildcat and get the reimbursement. So we're only out a day or two of cash flow on those recirculations. The total amount we paid through September on the recirculation project, and remember, we just started paying this 6 months ago or so, within my time since I've been here, $1.5 million. And we still have a ways to go on that project. So it's a big deal. It takes a lot of time and it's a lot of money. But in the end, Monument Academy comes out to zero. The reimbursement from PPRTA offsets the construction cost. And we even got a small amount for our share of the administration. Wasn't a big number. We booked that last year. It was about $60-something thousand, but that was kind of for all of our work that we put into it.
Thank you for that. Board, any other questions before you move on? Glenn?
I have a quick question. This isn't necessarily financial. It's just, well, I guess it is. The enrollment numbers that we're missing, the 80 enrollment number, were those kids that we were expecting to return, or were we projecting more for this year? And then secondarily, is the district also down in enrollment? Is it just kind of a district-wide thing? And are we do we have a handle on why?
So I want to be clear. We are actually only down 11 from October to October. Okay, so enrollment, when we're down, if you hear down 80, that's down 80 from our budgeted projected number. But our actual October count to October count is only 11. And what we're seeing, and Glenn, I've heard this a lot from him as well, because being at CDE, across the state, schools and districts are either flat or down. I haven't heard, even on my cohort call today, there wasn't a single school that's up in enrollment unless they're brand new and they're still starting to grow or whatnot. But, so I would say yes and no. The 80 number was, and Laura's here, so I'm thankful for that. Those were projected, and even Mr. Walker, we thought at elementary, the numbers were there to make the determination to say that there could have been 5 classes per, that we would have to add a class. And like Mr. Gustafson said, I was hesitant, and Krista and I both, and in conjunction with the principals, were really in conversation about, I'm very hesitant to hire new teachers until you see a certain number that is not just intense, but actual enrollments. And so there was a loss in those people, and that happened during that choice window because people will double enroll in places. And then all of a sudden oh yeah, I forgot to unenroll, or I forgot to take, no, I'm not interested in doing the full enrollment now. We have been able to, I think it was a number of 30 that you guys got in terms of who went to homeschool. So it's a little bit, it's different from new enrollments versus retention but we can get you like number to number from last year to this year. And because the registrars now are doing a much better process of tracking enrollment so that we can start to look at trends, because I had nothing really to go off of when looking at enrollment trends for here. It was kind of all over the board, but the registrars now, we're looking at retention. We're looking at what is the conversion rate, what is the, and conversion rate I mean from the time that they enroll to full enrollment to butt in the seat kind of thing. So, and when looking at even the 21 October count, we were at 1083. October count for 22 was 1111, and then down that 11 for this October count. So just looking at enrollment to enrollment, there's still some numbers in there with retention and conversion rates and so forth. So it was a very long confusing because it is confusing. And it's the curse of an administrator trying to chase the enrollment number and making those projections because it's of choice, it makes it all over the place. But did we over project this year? Yeah. But we also were highly conservative knowing what had happened, and we double checked, triple checked, quadruple checked the numbers when looking at budget. And when you're looking at the timing of when a budget's approved to the first day of school, there's a lot of time there, and there's more choice windows, and there was situations with recirculation, there was homeschool, Carline, there's grass is greener on the other side. And then we actually have had a few that have said, oh, I want to go there, but oh, wait, no, I want to come back. Or they've gone to a district school and they're like, okay, a month in, no, this is not what I wanted. And they may come back on our enrollment, and they met the deadline before an October count. But so that's that give and take that we end up having. And so there are some questions right now that we have that if they're an in-district student, do we transfer them? And contractually, there are some contract language that's around enrollment, and whether or not we would get funding for them, at what percentage from the district. Do we have to give money over if we have a student come from our school to the district at a certain number? And when we go into looking at the contract, which I forgot to give in my update, that we're amending our charter contract with the special education provisions that need to reflect more of what the actual practice is that we're doing. There's other sections like that enrollment section that we need to consider going into any other revisions that we look at in the spring, because that can affect us. So it can either benefit it or it can make it worse. So that 80 number, in summary, I would say is a very arbitrary number depending on all the different reasons in the conversion rate and who was truly in enrollment and who wasn't at that time. It's a lot that we will be tracking, and we can actually give you an even better report once October count's done. I'll have them maybe even present to you guys a different report so you can kind of maybe see some of the ebb and flows with that. I think it would be good for you guys to be able to really understand what all those numbers are when looking at different reports. So just even processing that out loud is something I think would be really valuable for you guys.
Kim, can I just add a couple footnotes to that, please? First of all, we're still in the window. It's not just count day, it's 5 days before, 5 days after, and there's all kinds of other exceptions in October and even into November where we can count kids. So know that this number is fluid. Every day, Laura is asking me, calling me, we're getting one here, we're losing one here, so it's fluid. Just know that. The other thing is, I hope sometimes finance people come across as too negative. Yes, are we going to have to rebalance our budget? Of course we are. We're going to do that earlier. I'm going to talk to that in my CFO report. We're going to do that earlier than normal. But we plan to be able to accommodate some changes. And so I think we're going to be fine. I am not alarmed. And so we're going to get through this and we'll figure it out. Is it great? No. We would have loved to have more kids. But this is not the end of the world. I don't want you to go away depressed. That we're going to figure this out and be okay.
And I think you guys have mentioned this before, that you are trying to do some kind of simple exit interview and try to get those reasons. I would love to see the data on that at some point too, if that's, I know it's not always possible, but just.
It is, and we actually, that is what the registrars are getting really good at. And they have great charts, and they have, they actually, in one of my weekly updates with Lindsay and Ryan, was really around, well, let's really look at the homeschool numbers, because we're wanting to make informed decisions about, possible programs in the future for MA. And so that's, I appreciate that the registrars are doing such a fantastic job with tracking this information and that exit information, because they have to ask questions when somebody doesn't enroll. They're calling every single one of them and asking them lots and lots of questions and gathering that information and putting it into the Google Drive so that it's not lost if they leave, which is what's been kind of in the past, which is why we don't have a lot of historical data, which is very valuable when we're going into plan for the budget year the next year. So.
Right, I think on to your CFO report.
Okay, thank you, President Graff. So the main thing I want to talk to you about is the budget process. So normally in school districts, we do what's called a mid-year budget, and we usually do that in December with a vote by the board in January. And the Colorado Department of Education calls it the mid-year budget because in December and January, you know your final pupil count, you know your final audited fund balance, which is your carryover from the prior year, you know your final staffing numbers. All that is kind of locked in by that time. Normally, I would wait to do this in December and January because I would have even better information. It would also be nice if the auditors were done with our audit. It's not going to be as late as it was last year. We're done with our part. We're just waiting on the Lewis Palmer part to be done. And then they can finish us once they've reconciled between the charter and the district. But our part is by and large done, and all of our adjustments have been already incorporated into the books. But I'm going to propose, and I've asked President Graham, if we could just do the budget early. And we may still do another mid-year budget later, which we can do. But I'm actually suggesting that we're going to have a budget work session in October and vote on an amended budget in November so that we can adjust to the revised people count, take the money out of the accounts that we have to reduce, add the revenues that we expect to add, so that we have a more realistic budget for our principals and our staff to be able to use. What I don't want them to do is, and I know they wouldn't do this, but go, woohoo, I have $10,000 in that account, I'm going to go spend it. And when really that's one of the line items that I'm going to have to cut. So I don't want them to have to do that. And so I would like to do it early, and I propose that if we could do that in October and November, that would be healthier for everybody. At that point, we would have a more realistic budget that's based on our actual enrollment count. That's it.
All right, terrific. And we are on track for the 26th for the budget work session, and then we're actually going to have discussion after this next action item regarding the calendar for the November meeting. Board, are there any further questions? All right, hearing none, that'll move us on to our resolution for bank authorized signatures on the raffle account. Mr. Gustafson advised me that Mr. Dykes will need to have an account for a raffle license for the state of Colorado in regard to our fundraising and gala. And this resolution will do exactly that. I'm just going to read it aloud right quick. Whereas I'll start with the resolution for bank authorized signatures for raffle account. Whereas Monument Academy desires to update its Integrity Bank account authorized signatures for a new raffle license bank account. And whereas current signatures are essential to provide appropriate internal controls, and whereas the Board of Directors desires to create the authorized signatures for staff currently serving in the appropriate raffle account roles. Now therefore be it resolved that the Board of Directors of Monument Academy do hereby approve the following list of authorized signatures for the Integrity Bank raffle account only. Board President Ryan Graham, Board Treasurer Joseph Buchkowski, Interim Chief Financial Officer Glenn Gustafson, Operations Manager Jason Dykes, Business Manager Diane Smith. So if somebody wants to move to approve that.
I move we approve the resolution for bank authorized signatures for a raffle account as presented this evening.
Second.
So Mrs. Hoyt has seconded that. That'll open this up to discussion, Board. Hearing no discussion, I will go ahead and call the vote. Mrs. Belisle.
Aye.
Mr. Buchkowski.
Aye.
Mr. Carley.
Aye.
Mrs. Clinton.
Aye.
Mrs. Hoyt.
Aye.
Mr. Ross.
Aye.
And Ryan Graham votes aye. That motion carries. That will approve the resolution. I'm going to go ahead and just execute this while I am thinking about it. Ms. Belisle, if you would attest. That will lead us to our next item on the agenda, which will be the yearly Board of Directors calendar for 23-24. Board, when we initially approved this calendar, we overlooked the fact that 2 of the months in this fiscal school year actually were assigned to the third Thursday of the month. Specifically would be November so next month, November of 2023, and that was November 16th, and then May 16th of 2024. We have approved this calendar as it is presented. My question to each of you would be, do we want to stay with the third Thursday for those 2 months, or do we want to move it up 1 week to the second Thursday for November of this year and May of next year?
I think we just keep it, move it back up to the second to make it easier on everyone else.
Historically, we've always just done the second Thursday, regardless of if the first week was a full week for the month or not. So making this change would avoid confusion from what we've historically done as a board.
Ms. Clinton, if you'd like to make a motion then to approve.
Somebody else wants a louder microphone? Mine's-
All right, I'll just make the motion real quick. A motion that we approve the yearly Board of Director calendar for the 23-24 fiscal year with the changes of November 16th to November 9th, 2023, and May 16th of 2024 to May 9th of 2024, with all other dates to be the same.
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion?
I have a question.
Yes.
I noticed on the page that it says Monument Academy West. Does that mean all board meetings will be at West going forward, or is that just at the top for some reason?
That's a good catch, Ms. Hoyda. The truth be told, I did not see that at the top. On the previous calendar, we did not have a assigned. Well, let me, you can amend the motion to remove that from the top to take away any type of confusion.
Sure, I'll just move that we remove the language that says West Campus, and it'll be however our board invites come out to determine the location.
Second.
Mr. Carley seconded that motion, so we'll vote on the amendment first and then the calendar, not to create confusion for you guys. Mrs. Belisle, how do you vote on the amendment to remove?
Aye.
Mr. Buczkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Carley?
Aye.
Ms. Clinton?
Aye.
Ms. Hoyda?
Aye.
Mr. Ross? Ryan Graham votes aye, and then the next motion will be for the approval of the calendar, going back to the motion with the removal of the Monument Academy West Campus Gym. I will go ahead and call the vote. Ms. Belisle, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buczkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Carley?
Aye.
Ms. Clinton?
Aye.
Ms. Hoyda?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Ryan Graham votes aye. That motion carries. That completes our items requiring board discussion action for the evening, which will lead us into our board comments and announcements. I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Clinton to speak on the board cafe chat.
Okay, just a reminder that on October 18th, Mrs. Belisle and Mr. Buczkowski will be meeting with those interested from 10 to 12 at Wesley Owens. And there is an RSVP out there, but I will include that with the board highlights that will go out as well. And then I just need to know who is interested in finding a November date for a cafe chat.
I'm happy to do it.
What date would it be?
November, whoever the two members are that decide to do the monthly chat, pick that based off of their own schedules.
I'll join Mrs. Hoyda. I haven't been at the last several, so.
Okay, so I have down Mr. Graham and Mrs. Hoyda. Thank you.
Are you good with that? Okay.
Yes.
All right. So we'll just pick a date.
Yep.
Terrific. We'll bring that back. And then board member volunteers for November. Oh, all right. So we're done with board comments. Board, any further comments or announcements tonight? Hearing none, I'll move us to new business. We know that we will have in November, at November 9th meeting, the action item for the budget, revised budget approval. All right. No further new business. I will move us to a motion to adjourn to executive session. If somebody would like to read that motion.
I motion to adjourn us to executive session pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, Section 4A, to discuss lease and potential purchase of property near West Campus.
Second.
Mr. Carley seconded that motion. Any discussion? Hearing none. Ms. Belisle, how do you vote?
Aye.
Mr. Buczkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Carley?
Aye.
Ms. Clinton?
Aye.
Ms. Hoyda?
Aye.
Mr. Ross?
Aye.
Ryan Graham votes aye. That motion carries. This will be a very brief executive session. We will resign ourselves to the conference room.